Hello there and welcome. So I'm Dave Hoelzer. I'm the host of this live stream that we're going to be running. And of course, you've seen the title. The title is about connecting TensorFlow and Zeek together and trying to create some really useful machine learning solution. We're going to be doing that over the course of a couple of weeks. But for this inaugural live stream, which I am personally subtitling Dave's live stream Python fails, because you're going to get to see me write a lot of bad code over the course of this. For this inaugural stream, I just want to thank you for coming, whether you're here live or you're tuning in later. And I want to invite you to please feel free to reach out to me either during the live stream or after the live stream's over. Maybe you want to put a comment on this and let me know if you've got suggestions for things you'd like to see. Because the focus of this live stream isn't just TensorFlow or Zeek or even machine learning. It's really more broadly about information security generally and how to do it effectively. So I'm not talking about creating architecture and policies and those things, but instead down in the weeds, how do I actually accomplish this task? And while my focus is on maybe some slightly more advanced tasks and how to apply modern technologies to those things, I'm really happy to talk about anything that really makes sense or fits the theme of the live stream. Also, over some of the episodes, we may have some guests who come in either to conduct it. My friend Andy Lehman, who partners with me in the Sec 503 course that we teach through SANS, he's actually already got some ideas of some things he'd like to talk about. So he'll be doing that likely in October or so, getting him on the calendar now. But we're also very happy to maybe invite in vendors or others that you'd like to hear from if there's specific questions you've got about products or again, how to use that tool. But for this time, what we're going to try to do is set up this idea that within just a few episodes, we'd like to see if I can get Zeek interfaced with some kind of a machine learning solution. And I'm gonna give you a little spoiler here. We can. What we're going to try to do today is put together just the pieces we need to initially get Zeek talking to Python. So that's going to require setting up a broker communication channel. And this is something that is in the Zeek documentation, but you might find it a little difficult to follow. And there maybe aren't a lot of great examples out there you can just take and just reuse. So we're going to build the bare bones pieces you need to make that happen, and then see if we can get Zeek starting to send some messages over to us in Python. Now, I'm choosing to use Python for this because in the end, what we're going to be doing is putting this into a TensorFlow solution and building a notebook to do that. Of course, we could use that TensorFlow model in C# or C or C++ or JavaScript or lots of other places. So anywhere that I can get broker running, I can end up using this as well. But for the purposes of the live stream and what the project we're going to build, we're going to use Python to do that. So I've already got some of this stuff up and running already. Let me just get up on the screen here where my work will be. And forgive me if I don't look right at you. It's actually kind of challenging to look at the chat and look at the at my screen where I'm writing and look at you all at the same time, because I clearly can't put my camera in my screen. But I've got a machine up and running here. I'm actually not using my production system. We're going to switch over to that during some point in the live streams, and we'll be using, I say it's a production system. It's sort of a production system. It's on our production network. We do use it for production testing, but it isn't one of our live sensors sitting at a customer site because, that would not be cool to show you customer data. Hey there, nice to see you from Panama, Mr. LinkedIn. Nice to have you. So we'll switch over to that a little later because there's other stuff we may want to interface in, and it's going to be really nice to pull in live data. But for this first episode, I think we're just going to stick with a VM. And the VM I've chosen to use, this is actually from the Sec 503 course that we teach at SANS. This is the challenge coin for that. And I'm using it just because I've got all the dependencies here. I don't know if you've gone through setting up Zeek yourself or setting up broker and getting that to talk to Python. It isn't necessarily difficult, but it can be a little challenging if you get things a little out of order, or maybe you forget to have Python installed before you build broker. I mean, you can run into some issues there. Actually, if you're interested, if that's something a number of people want, we could even do a live stream that's just getting all those things set up correctly. But I've got all those pieces set up here, at least for the most part. I've got them set up correctly already. So let me just get started with the Zeek side of that. Now, the Zeek side of that requires that we use this broker library. And of course, if you're familiar with Zeek, if you've looked at the documentation for it, hey there, Corey, nice to see you from Stuttgart. And do feel free to reach out. And I am looking forward to seeing any comments you've got. So if you see me do something wrong, I said this is Dave's Python fail. So you see me failing, please do put a comment in there and save me from myself. If you got questions about what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, or even better, a suggestion on a better way to do it, my goodness, I am very happy to hear that. And I teach a course on machine learning and data science, applied machine learning and data science. And one of the things that I tell the class right at the beginning is, yes, we are using Python. We are going to write a line of Python code. I can write Python code, but I am by no means going to call myself a Python pro. So I am sure that there's people here who will know a lot more about it than I do. Hey there, Silvio. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Emil and Percio. Pleasure to have you here. I'm just going to head over to the Zeek documentation here. And actually, you know what? I think I'm going to do this through Google because I love the Zeek documentation. It is very thorough, but I find that sometimes getting to the actual page I want, it can be a little bit challenging. So let me just do this. Let me just push through from this way. So I've got the Zeek documentation up here, and it's got some information about the Python bindings and some examples down here on how to make that work. We're actually going to do it though. So let me push that out of the way. We will likely need that at some point. And I am going to, I think I'm actually going to start by starting up Tmux here because I am a fan of running multiple screens at the same time. And I kind of like to see what I'm editing and test it sort of at the same time. So in my lower window here, let me just head off to user local Zeek, share Zeek site, and whoops, site. And I'm just going to drop my script right in here. And this is just a plain vanilla Zeek install. There's nothing has been added to it yet there. Hey there, Georgi. Nothing else has been added yet. But so we're going to start from there. I'm going to drop this communication script out here because I can just easily load it using the local.zeek. And how you organize your stuff, that's up to you. But I'm just going to drop it in here. Let me become root here because, whoops, that should be that you, because my user doesn't have rights out here. And let's start editing. Let me call it the comms.zeek. And I'm actually a person who really likes to write a little code and then test immediately. And we can sort of do that, but that's a little tough to do for this particular episode because we've got pieces that need other pieces in order to work. So we're going to write the code and test to make sure it functions, but to actually talk to it and see output, we sort of have to wait till we get to the end where we have the payoff of having the Python script that can talk to it too. Anyway, let's just get started here. So in my script, I'm going to try to use some good practice. I'm going to begin by just defining a model for this, or a module, excuse me. I'm going to call it the TensorFlow module. Maybe not the best name. I'm using that name not because it's needed. I mean, Zeek knows nothing about TensorFlow. I'm adding that in at this point because I need to have a module name because I want to collect this all in one namespace. And I don't have a better module name at this point in mind. So eventually I will likely change that, but we'll just start calling that for now because we're going to get it to talk to TensorFlow. I also am going to need to set up a Zeek broker channel within Zeek. So probably the easiest way to do that is to take advantage of the Zeek init function. And in case you're unfamiliar, let's just, again, let's just Zeek init. It's a pretty handy event that gets generated whenever Zeek starts up. Let me just find it down here. There's our variables and stuff somewhere down here. So file done. I feel like I'm better off doing a quick search here for Zeek init. There we go. All right. So Zeek init is a function that gets called on any script that you create where you define it. And of course, even so far, I'm sort of assuming that if you're tuned into this, you probably know a little bit about Zeek. But just in case you don't, Zeek is very different than pretty much any other tool you use for network monitoring or packet analysis, in that it is really an event-based system and doesn't draw conclusions about what's happening. It just exposes the events to you, so you can choose to react to them if you'd like to. Now, there's a whole bunch of events that are defined kind of out of the box, or I shouldn't say defined, things that will get logged, things that will get triggered. There's a bunch of stuff that happens automatically, but you have the ability to create a script to react to any kind of event, like, hey, a packet arrived, or, oh, a new connection started, or maybe a certain number of bytes went by, or whatever it is. The Zeek init event gets called whenever Zeek starts up. So to use it, I can see it's a type event. So that's the C-like type that I'll use for Zeek init, and it has no parameters. So I knew that already, actually. I've already written that in there. Let's just stick in some code here. And what would I use Zeek init for? Well, it's actually a perfect function for what we're doing, because once this script starts up, I wanted to publish data out of my streams. In fact, let me give you a big picture of where we're heading. In order to take the data out of Zeek and push it into TensorFlow to be able to do some machine learning, whether that's in TensorFlow doing actual machine learning, supervised learning, which is what we're going to head toward using an autoencoder, or if I wanted to maybe push this into something like a clustering solution that I'd like to do DB scan analysis on what's happening and see clustering of data and react to clusters. Whatever I want to do with it, I need to push the data out of Zeek. Now, there will be a little bit of a challenge with that we're going to address in our second stream, because as it turns out, getting at the data and manipulating it within Zeek is trivial. It's just there. But pushing that data over a broker stream, that's a little bit challenging. And we've worked out how to do it, so I'm going to show you that. I don't think I'll get to that today, but the idea will be to take the content of a stream, not the entire stream, but maybe the first couple of hundred bytes, and to ship that off to an external piece of code that can do something with it. And for us, that's going to be some machine learning. That's going to be some anomaly detection. But to do that, I need to have this broker stream running, because that's the thing I use to ship it off. Could I write it down into a file and have another process watching and picking things up out of the directory? I could. That's a little hackish for what we're doing here, because Zeek supports this communication library. In order to use it, I need to say that I'm accessing something from that namespace, so broker. And within that namespace, I'm going to subscribe. And this is the first thing that might feel a little non-intuitive. I need to create a subscription to a broker, let's call it a broker channel, where things are going to be published. And the way I define that channel is going to look like a directory path, and that's just how we do it. What feels a little non-intuitive is I'm subscribing to it, but in fact, it doesn't exist yet. Well, by the act of me subscribing to it in this script, I am creating it. So if you're thinking of trying to use broker, you're hunting through the documentation, trying to say, how do I create a broker stream? How do I do that? All you do is you subscribe to it. You just create it. And I think I'm going to name this one TensorFlow, just because that's the name of the module it's coming out of. There's just no other reason. It's totally an arbitrary name. And in the end, what I'm going to be publishing is going to be some content. I'm going to be publishing out stream content. And hey, nice to have some folks from Singapore. Very nice to have you here. And hey there, Mohammed. Nice to meet you too. So I'm going to call this the content channel, because that's ultimately what I'm going to publish. But again, it's totally arbitrary here. All right, so with that part defined, now I need to tell it to start listening. I need to create an endpoint, a socket, where I can connect from my other process. And again, there's a function for that. It's the listen function. And if you've done some network programming, that might feel a little bit familiar. I don't have to go through the energy of generating the socket and doing the accept and all that stuff. I can just jump straight to the listen. Everything else is taken care of for me. But I do need to tell it where it will be listening. And for the purposes, at least of today, I'm going to have it listen on localhost because I'm doing all this dev just on one box. But of course, I could also publish this remotely. So I could have remote things talking to it and have a lot greater scale in terms of my broker communication. It doesn't just have to be one host talking to another. This could be a whole mesh of things communicating and sending messages, which frankly we do use when we do cluster of cluster kinds of work where we're doing correlation across different clusters. We'll sometimes have intercluster communication happening through broker where they're sharing data state, sharing things like threat development information, things like that from inside of our own scripts, our own Zeek kind of stuff. So I need to tell it where it'll listen. I'll have it listen on localhost. And I also need to give it a port number. So this is just saying where it will listen. I'm going to use 9999 as TCP. And notice here that we're using the Zeek types. Oh, let's see here. So is it possible to create a model from the machine learning algorithm? So using Google, Jupyter, and then yeah, that's actually where we're headed, Mohammed. I have to tell you, we are not going to get there today. This is going to take us a couple of live streams to do, but that is absolutely where we are heading. So you're going to be interested in finding out about that. In fact, if you've got any other friends or people you work with who want to know how to do that, they may want to come to this too. So if you feel free to invite them. And out of curiosity, if you don't mind just poking into the channel there, I am a little bit curious. Do any of you folks, how many of you folks, I'm just assuming you are, but how many of you folks are already using Zeek to do stuff, and you're really coming here because you want to see maybe a little bit more advanced Zeek content? So is that true for many of you folks? I'm going to keep on going while you answer me. Because that'll help me figure out what level I should be at as I'm explaining things as I go. The next thing I need to do here, I'm going to use the auto publish function to be able to create a thing that I'm going to be pushing content out of or publishing into that Zeek stream. Hey there, Abdullah. Nice to see you from Saudi Arabia. And in order to do that, I now need to give it the channel we're headed to. So let's say TensorFlow/content. And then, well, I need to give it an event that I'm going to publish. And when I say event here, for those of you who have used Zeek, at least in its basic form, you might be thinking, you're talking about one of these? Well, not exactly. And, okay, no problem. That's great to hear, Jesus. So I'll be dealing with that and doing some basic introductory stuff then too. You've used it before. That's awesome. Hey there, Michael. Nice to meet you. Let me come up here to the top and explain what I mean by generating an event. Oh, awesome. So that's really interesting. I'm wondering how to say your name. So how do I say that? Is it Francesco? Is that, it looks like there's a E on the end there. I'm just not quite sure. So if I'm way off, do let me know. I know I like when people say my name right. If you are evaluating Zeek, please don't judge it by just this episode, but you're going to want to pay attention because this tool is phenomenal. I've mentioned to you that I teach this 503 class. Myself and Andy kind of write this class. And in that class, I had a gentleman who had been working in a SOC for about 10 years sit through the discussion we give on Zeek. And we spend a full day working with Zeek in that class and try to get you through some pretty advanced high-end correlation using Zeek, stuff that is absolutely impossible to do using any signature-based tool. So that would be Suricata and Firepower and all those tools. You just cannot do this stuff. And after sitting through the demonstration where we show you how you can correlate and react to real-time phishing attacks using no signature. So it's an unknown phishing scheme. He comes up to me afterward and said, you know what, I have to tell you, we have been running Zeek in our data center for 3 years. And it was not until I sat through this demonstration that I understood why I care about this tool. So that's just anecdotal for you at this point, but definitely tune into some of these because the Zeek stuff is pretty incredible. Oh, that's interesting, Maury. So yeah. So hi, nice to see you again from Sec 503. Okay. Thank you very much. So it's Francesco. Thank you. Or Francesco. Thank you very much. All right. Anyway, I was talking about this idea of an event. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that is pretty cool, Antonio. Personally, now within our organization, I actually lead our machine learning research stuff. So we have invested in building our own machine learning systems, but the stuff you can do out in Colab is pretty awesome, and the stuff you can do in the free tier is pretty cool. Oh, hey, oh, and I know your name, Richard. I feel like I've only seen you in the last couple of months. Nice to see you there. Um, but back to event. You guys keep distracting me. So you can create your own events, things that you want to react to. And you can either do that, for instance, by writing a protocol analyzer. Maybe you're going to use Spicy and write a protocol analyzer to react to things and generate events out of it. You can do that. But I can also define my own events as long as, well, not even as long as, I can create my own events, period. But if I want them to do anything, something must trigger them, something must fire them off. So what we need to do here is define an event message, kind of an event thing that can be generated that we can then use to trigger events into our broker stream. So to do that, I'm just going to define something as being of type event. And, oh, actually, no, I'm sorry, that's not quite right. I'm going to define something, a global thing that I'm going to call query. I'm calling it query because I'm not going to solve the getting all the content out of the stream yet. I mean, that's a more difficult problem. I just want to solve the sort of a hello world here. Can I get this to talk at all? So to do that, I think what I'm going to do is trigger on DNS messages, or I'm DNS query. So I'm just going to call this thing query. Again, that's not a magical name. That's just a choice. So I'm going to define a global called query. So this is something I can access from outside of the namespace. And I'm going to say that it is an event, a thing of type event, that will have a header, or an originating host of type address. And let me put in the port of type port, and I'll put in a responding host of adder. And for those of you who are kind of new to this, it is that might seem a little arbitrary. Where are these things coming from? Well, these are things that are defined within the Zeek connection, the originating host and the originating port, the responding host, responding port, key. And I just noticed I have put in an incorrect type there. So let me just fix that. And I've also got a question here. Zeek can be used with any kind of SIM? Yes, absolutely you can. I can push the data from this out as just text, comma separated or tab delimited, whatever I'd like. Or alternatively, very, very simple. It's just an option to push it out as JSON. So many folks are pushing their Zeek logs out as JSON straight into their SIM. And while you can sure do that, and then try to do your correlation over in your SIM, I am a very big proponent of you should be doing your correlation here for anything dealing with network events, and then generating events into your SIM that are telling you there's something wrong or giving you richer information, rather than just shoving this all into the SIM as is and letting the SIM sort it out. Because writing the rule in the SIM will be really hard. Writing the rule here in Zeek, if I spend just a little time learning the Zeek scripting language, is really easy and incredibly powerful. So to directly answer your question, yes, I can just push this into my SIM. But as I do that, I am going to recommend you do a little work here on this end first. All right, so I've got the address, the port number, the responding host and responding port number. And then let's also put the DNS message. And where am I getting that type from? DNS message. Let me come back over here to my Zeek documentation. And let me go into my protocol analyzers and just pull up DNS, because I have that in my mind. And let's go into the events here. And I'm actually, this is the specific event I'm thinking about, the DNS message event. The DNS message event gets fired anytime any DNS message, so it's a query, it's a response, doesn't matter, anytime that goes by. And that seems like a pretty decent thing to react to just kind of, hello world and prove this thing works. I could react to every packet, but I feel like that's going to be way too noisy. So instead, I'm just going to use the DNS event because there's not going to be like a billion of those in a packet capture. And inside of this, I can see that one of the things that is passed to me is the message or what it is that's being requested or answered or whatever. And that is of type DNS underscore message. So that's where I have gotten that type from. That's what I'm defining this message to be. Now that I have that event defined, I'm going to say that it's those things that I'm going to publish. So I'm going to publish that. All right. So with that done, I've really got my Zeek init set up. If we were to start Zeek right now and publish out this script, we would now be listening on port 9999, though it's not actually going to do anything yet because nothing ever triggers this event to get published. I need to trigger that event to get published. So let's work on doing that. I'm going to come back over here and I am going to copy this out. And hey, just in case anyone here is on the Zeek development team, and I could just pop this into the Slack channel over there. I just haven't, but it has long baffled me why the documentation is laid out the way it is. I mean, it's great. Don't get me wrong. Thank you for having such awesome documentation and for using things like Doxygen in order to stick it right with the code because it keeps it up to date. But as just a small request, if we could instead maybe up here have event DNS message and then the parameters, I can't imagine I'm the only one who just cuts and pastes this stuff. And being able to copy the DNS message on its own, that's not awesome. So save me some typing. Just, maybe restructure that a little bit, because if we did that, you could just copy and paste in that whole thing and it would just work. Anyway, I now am reacting to DNS messages. I am putting my hand up within this script and saying, anytime there's any DNS message, I want to be informed. I want to be sent a copy so I can choose to handle that. So let's handle it. What we're going to do here is use broker to publish one of those messages. That message is going to get published into TensorFlow/content. It is going to be a query. And here are the things that make that event up. Now, the things that make that up, what would those be? Let me just scroll up here. It's going to be these things. I need to give it all of those fields. Where do I get them? Well, take the originating host. The originating host is going to be found inside of the connection where it is in there as a subfield. It's a part of, so $ID of the ID field. Because within Zeek, the ID is used to put together to uniquely identify the things that are happening. And that's composed of things like the originating host and the originating port and the destination host or the responding host and the responding port. So those things make up the ID. So there's the originating host. And I know it's weird. I asked someone on the Zeek team this like 5 years ago, and they gave me an answer. I do not remember the answer. It didn't make sense to me. So I'm sorry, it didn't make sense to me. Because in any other language, I would do this. I would say C.ID dollar or C.ID responding host, which feels very familiar and very intuitive if you've done any kind of what's going on in any kind of object-oriented language, or if you use Wireshark or anything. But here, we're replacing those dots with dollar signs. And forgive me for not remembering the explanation for that. I'm kind of doubtful of the explanation personally, because if they felt it was so important, why didn't they stick with that in the logs? Because in the logs, you actually use dots, but whatever, dollar signs. And what else do I need here? I need oh, that's not quite right. I think this is supposed to be the originating port. And then we've got $ID responding host, $ID responding port. And then we've got the DNS message, which is passed to us as just MSG. So I know that I called it message, and that's the field it will put it inside of, but it's actually passing it to us as MSG. So that's what I'm going to pass into my broker publish. All right. So with that done, barring any errors, that part is completed. So let me save this. Let me bring my screen back. And up here, I'm going to move into that same directory. User, local, Zeek, share, Zeek, site. And let's just try Zeek. I don't know if I have any packet captures here. Well, I have to become root here because I'm going to listen on a port here. Oop, helps if you type the password correctly. All right, so let's do Zeek-I. I'll have it listen on loopback. Don't expect to see much there. And I'll ask it to use the comms.zeek, .zeek. And hopefully I don't get errors. Oh, no errors. And in fact, let me split this again. Let's just do a netstat dash grep listen through more. And and not installed. So hang on, let's install that. App install NetTools. I don't know why they took netstat out as a default tool, man. That thing is so useful. Netstat dash and to grep listen. All right, that's maybe a little too much there. How about instead, let me grep for the 9999, and there it is. So I know for sure it is working because I can see it is listening. It is functioning. And in fact, Zeek is talking to itself. So that's phenomenal. I know it works. All right, let me close this up, get that out of there. And I'm going to interrupt this because while I now have that script functioning, I do need to change my Zeek configuration so that it's actually getting it loaded. Now, I saw that some of you folks are using Zeek. How many of you have actually written a Zeek script? Has anyone done that? I mean, aside from me or maybe the 503 people, how many of you have actually created a Zeek script? And if you have, what's the coolest thing you've done with it? I'll share some of the things I've done maybe a little later, but what cool things have you done? Have you done an awesome thing using Zeek scripting? While you're thinking about that, let me just open up my local.zeek because this is where you tell Zeek what to load. This is the kind of the master configuration for how Zeek will function. And I am going to throw this down at the bottom. I'm going to load comms, and that should be all I need to do. So let me exit out of this. So there we go. I've changed my local.zeek. So I've inadvertently, so in 503, new to this, that's fine. In my local folder, notice we've created a couple of logs files here. I actually didn't mean to do that. Just tail the broker.log. When I do that, you can see, hey, look at that. It actually worked. I wasn't really paying attention when I tested it and inadvertently forgot that it's just going to drop log files wherever I am. And this is probably not the best place to put log files in the user local Zeek. So let me just get rid of those log files because I was being messy. Fantastic. And they're okay. And next, let me use Zeek control because I have changed my local.zeek. Let me change Zeek control or use Zeek control to deploy that. Because in my local.zeek, I told it, please load this comms thing. It looks like that worked. Let's go out to user local Zeek logs current, and let's look at broker.log, and it does seem to be running. So in case I'm just not sure, let me go for comms in my loaded scripts. Yes, so it is absolutely loading that up. So by doing the deploy, it migrates what's in your user local Zeek, share Zeek's site. It migrates that into the production configuration and would, of course, push it out into your cluster if you were running as a cluster. Well, all right, so that part is done. I know that's working. So for the next part, let me get out of this. I don't think I need that. Let me come back here. What I'd like to do now is maybe make a directory to do this in. I'm going to call this, let's call it live stream. Let's just go in there. And I'm going to create the Python script to talk to it. Now, I don't need to write that using Jupyter, but I'm going to because it creates an easy way to kind of keep track of what I'm doing and run my experiments. And what I'm thinking is that as we move forward, we're eventually going to be plugging this into a bigger machine learning thing. And I'm going to be writing that using Python and TensorFlow. And I don't know about you, but when I'm writing that kind of stuff, Jupyter is a lifesaver for being able to tinker and make edits and see how things happen. And so I feel like I'm just going to start as I mean to go on, and I'm just going to use Jupyter to do this. So let me start up Jupyter Notebook, and I'm going to have it run that in the local directory. So there we go. Jupyter is now up and running. And what I'd like to do is, let me create a new IPython kernel. There we go. I actually use Jupyter Lab far more frequently, but on this particular VM, Jupyter Notebook is what's here. And let's get started by pulling in a couple of things that we need. We know that we need to talk to Zeek, and that's going to require broker. So I'm going to start just by pulling in the broker dependency. Hey, out of curiosity, are you folks using Jupyter today? For those of you who are doing Python development, maybe working in data science or machine learning, do you prefer Jupyter? Do you prefer Spider? If you prefer something over Jupyter, and I appreciate if you're using Colab, I mean, I get why you're doing that because you've got the TPUs behind it and all that stuff, and Google just lets you use a bunch of that stuff for free. So maybe you're using that. But if you're using something else that you prefer, why do you prefer it? I'm always looking for new tools. So if you're using something, what is it and why do you prefer it? In the meantime here, let me just get my sys imported as well. I need broker because I need to talk to Zeek, and I'm importing sys because in the end, I'm going to be just checking to make sure that my Zeek connection works, that my broker connection works. And if it doesn't, I want to bail out. And within Python, an easy way to do that is sys exit. So I just want to import sys in there so I have it available. Let's just make sure those load. They do. That's always good. And to do the Python side of the communication, we need to do a little bit of upfront configuration. The very first thing I need to do is sort of have an object that's going to act as the endpoint or allow me to have the connection. So I'm going to create a broker.endpoint. And I'm also going to generate a subscription out to the thing that I'm talking to. So again, just a little bit of upfront legwork here. Let's take that endpoint and let's make a subscriber to TensorFlow/content. Now, I know that doesn't exist yet. In other words, the connection doesn't, but that's what's going to be happening. So I'm just building the pieces that will be needed. Another thing that I'm going to need is something that can tell me about the status of what's happening in that broker connection. If it gets disconnected, whether or not we connect successfully, whatever it is, so I can interrogate the current status of what's happening there. So I'm going to create another thing called a status subscription. And of course, you're welcome to use shorter names here. I like to be a little bit more concise myself, but for writing it here, I think I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Endpoint.make status subscriber. And that's going to be true. So I'm going to tell it subscribe to the status, and here's where that's going to go. And finally, I should be able to say endpoint.peer is going to be the local host machine on port 9999. Notice there is a little difference here. On the Zeek side, I include the /TCP. We do not do that here because I am not inside of Zeek. Inside of Zeek, 9999/TCP is a type. I mean, that's a particular thing. It's a port, and there's a port class. Now I am in just raw Python. There is no such thing. So that's just a number. And let's just see that works. So it looks like it's happy with everything I've asked it to do. So let's grab the status out of the status subscription. So let's say status equals status subscription dot get. Let's grab the status and let's put a little check in there. Let's say if not the type of the status. So if the status is not a broker status and status.code is not, so these are both nots, right? I've got this not sitting in the front. So if it's not a broker status and it's not broker.sc.peer added, which is the SC, the status code to say I have successfully connected to you. So if it's not that, let's just print connection failed. And let's sys.exit with a 1. So let's just try that out. And maybe down here, let's say otherwise print connected. Cross your fingers. Okay, so it's not happy. What have I got here? Oop, status. Where did I do that? Status. There it is. Let's change that to status. All right, so it should be talking to it now. It looks unhappy to me. Let's see what happens. I'm always nervous. I don't know how many of you who use Jupyter run it through Anaconda. I actually do that pretty frequently, but I never started from that Anaconda Navigator button. That is just a really bad thing to do, because what sometimes will happen is you'll end up with a crash. I actually prefer to run it from a command line, because that way if the kernel crashes, I'm going to know about it rather than see just an asterisk hanging out here forever. I'm a little concerned about this. I think I'm going to shut down or restart and clear output here. I may have waited too long there between the time I tried to create it and then tried to get the status on it. So let's just run these little, oh, there we go. And that's exactly what happened. I really would be better off moving this check into this cell, because otherwise what's happening is the connection's getting established and then it's kind of idling out because I took so long to do the next step and I just never got any kind of status code back on it. So let me just kernel, restart, clear output, and just do that one more time. Let's keep those two pieces together. There we go. I have successfully connected, and apparently I have a parenthesis just hanging out here. So let me just get that out of there. Fantastic. So now that I am connected, the next thing to do is to actually grab the data out of that channel. How do I do that? So I'm going to say while one. So we're just going to do an infinite loop here, and I'm going to grab the tag or the channel or whatever you want to call it, the tag and the data out of the subscription. And let's just, for now, let's just print those two things. There we go. Now that's not going to return because it's in an infinite loop here. What I need then is I need some DNS data going past my Zeek. To make that happen, I'm going to stick this in the background. It's going to become root here. And, ooh, that sounds interesting there, Omid. I don't know what that is. Let me just copy that. I think I will maybe just pull that up in a different browser here. Let me just do that for a second, because a CVE involving Zeek sounds very important. So while that loads, what do we got here? Our number of vulnerabilities 1 from 2019. What was it? I wasn't even familiar with that. Let me just pull that up. Maybe I'll pull that up for the whole team here. Oh, a null pointer to reference in Kerberos. Okay. Only one vulnerability. That's great to hear. And that problem has been fixed. It involved Kerberos. So that's all resolved. Thanks for the tip, though. I actually wasn't conscious of the fact there had been one, Omid. All right, what was I doing? Oh, yes, I was becoming root, because what I would like to do is fire some packets past this thing so I can actually see if it's working. So let me just change my viewer a little bit so I can see them both. And I, on this machine, have a mess of packets. And you 503 folks will certainly recognize this. So I'm using the 503 VM, as I mentioned, so I can see that there are packets present. And I am just going to stream those packets past this. So to make that happen, we're going to be using TCP Replay. And I'm going to look at the help for it because I don't use this tool every day. TCP Replay. And I'm just going to shoot those packets back. Oh, why can't I? Oh, I know why I can't go back, because I'm in tmux. Okay, there we go. and I am going to stream these packets past. I will do it at full speed, so I want a dash capital T, and I want to send them over an interface. How do I do that? Primary output, client to server, traffic output interface. I think I just use dash I. We'll see what happens. If it blows up, it blows up. We'll figure it out. And I then give it the PCAP file. Okay. So let's do analyze backbone, which is just a script we have on this machine for interrogating data out of the sensors that we've got. We've got a couple of sensors on here, and it's backbone. And I'm going to pipe that through TCP Replay. I will try to do it at full speed over interface loopback, and then I need to give it a file name. Now, I don't know if you know this trick already, but in Unix, in a command pipeline, if I want to use the input of or the output of one as the input of another or as a file name, I can use the special file name of a dash. So let's just fire that in. And whoa, I'm going to stop it already because back here, what happened? Look at that. We have now got Zeek talking to our Python script. Excellent. So that works. Right now, let's look what the output is that we get. I get TensorFlow : query. So that is I called it the tag here. It's the thing that's getting fired at me. I guess you could say it's the type. It's a TensorFlow query. That's the kind of event I'm getting. And then after that, I have all of the different fields that make up that message. And we can make this output just a little bit prettier if we'd like to. Let me just rewrite this a little bit because there's sort of a helper function to help us. So if I use broker Zeek event on the data, I can ask it to see the args. So let's do that. And I'm going to just clear or restart and run all just to get that running again. All right, so that is up and going. Let's rerun our analyze. And when we do, let's pull down here. So this is now way easier to handle because rather than having to parse the text in there or whatever was happening, notice now I can see this thing as a list of stuff. Parsing this data out becomes trivial to immediately turn it into a Python thing. Now that means that what we've done today, we have started with the idea of we want to create some kind of machine learning solution, and that is where we're heading. That's what we're going to create. But in order to make that work, I have to have a way to get the data out of Zeek and into a TensorFlow model or whatever I'm using, because I said maybe we'll use dbScan for clustering. So whatever I'm pushing it into, I need to get it out of Zeek. Unless, of course, you really want to implement back propagation and forward passes and all that other stuff in Zeek. And I'll tell you what, I sure don't. And it's definitely not the place to do it because it's not a highly optimized environment for parallelized math. So instead, we're pushing it out using broker. That required that we be able to create a broker channel. So if I have a look here, let me just cat the user local Zeek share Zeek site comms. So this was all we needed to make it happen. I defined my own model, created or generated an event of my own, and then generated a Zeek broker channel. Following that, over on the Python side, so I wonder, can I kind of get these things side by side? Over here on the Python side, here was all of the code required to actually talk to that Zeek channel or that broker channel. I'm just trying to get them in there low. Yeah, it's not going to wrap. This one will, though. So let me just scoot this guy down. There we go. Let's get them there side by side. So we have now got both ends of that communication happening. I'm pushing the data out of broker and pulling it in out of Python. What we need to do next is figure out how I can grab the first X number of bytes out of data streams. We're going to try to solve that problem in the next live stream. That's going to be 2 weeks from today on Friday at noon, which seems to be a good time. In fact, if this is not a great time, if you'd like to be here in person, you want to interact, you've got questions you want to ask, or you want to ask me questions during it, please again add a comment down there in the live stream or at the comments of the video, and let us know that, because we kind of did a little survey and it seemed like noon on Friday was the best possible time. Although choosing to do it noon on Friday leading into a holiday weekend in the US may not have been the best first choice, but we did what we did. So let us know that if there's like a better time for live engagement. And of course, if you've got questions afterward, ping us there as well. But in our next live stream, what we're going to do is see, how can I write a Zeek function that's going to grab the content at the beginning of a stream, and then how do I get that out over Zeek through broker and capture that in Python and start reprocessing it? Because there's a little bit of a challenge there. The reason we're pulling that data out of the stream is, in the long term, we are going to be focused on how do I apply machine learning to this and how can I do some anomaly detection on it. And to do that, I need the stream, because I want to do some automatic detection of the protocol that's involved. So yeah, hey, thank you very much, Omid. Good to have you here, Wavy Ninja. I hope you have a really good meme to go with that one. And if you have any other questions right now, I will hang around for a couple of minutes. But for right now, our first live stream is a wrap. Feel free to reach out to me over LinkedIn or over Twitter, or of course, you can ping me in the comments here. Thanks so much for coming. Let me know if you've got feedback for us, if you've got requests for other things to talk about. We'll see if we can get those things slotted in. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a wonderful afternoon.